I'm Judy Murray, and I'm often asked, what is a driving force? Well, it's something or someone who has the power to make things happen. I've seen firsthand just how far we've come in terms of levelling the playing field for female sports, and yet we still have so much ground to cover. On this journey, I'll meet some of our most successful sports stars, from football, rugby, netball, athletics, boxing, horse racing, and motor racing, and hear stories of dedication, determination, resilience, and exceptional skill. My aim is to look at where we've come from, where we are now, and at what the future holds. If you can see it, you can be it. I'm on my way to meet with Hayley Turner, who is the UK's most successful female jockey. She has over 900 winners to her name, and she's the first female rider to have ridden 100 winners in one season. Now, I don't know much about horse racing, so I am fascinated to hear her backstory and to meet some of those who have been a major part of her success. I'm also really keen to explore a sport that offers the same opportunities to men and women in terms of competition and allows them to achieve the same goals and the same successes.
Hayley never made a big deal out of her being a female. She didn't come from a racing background, and yet she's established herself as one of the best flat jockeys in the UK.
I would say Hayley was the pioneer, really, in this last 20 years. You know, it's opened eyes to other girls to say, well, if she can do it, we can.
For me to even be classed in the same league as Hayley these days is amazing, because it only feels like 5 minutes ago I was looking up to her.
She was the first woman to ride an outright Group 1 winner in England. To go and win that first Group 1 in a sport that's dominated by men, or certainly was at the time, it was huge and big for the sport and front-page headlines.
She has been a trailblazer throughout her career, and the one thing that was missing was this Royal Ascot win. And so for her to do that on one of mine was fantastic, and something I'm very, very proud of.
The wall she's knocked down, the glass ceiling she's smashed through, and the way she's done it in such a determined but also such a charming fashion.
When you watch her ride, she's so relaxed on a horse. She's part of a horse, she feels a horse.
The greatest impact that Hayley has had in horse racing is that a lot of those girls that are now getting involved in the sport that you see in the racing schools, she has made them all believe that this can be us.
You are the UK's most successful female jockey. Can we go back to the early days? And you grew up a couple of miles from Nottingham Racecourse with Mum and Dad, and Mum was a riding instructor. So was it inevitable that you were going to have a life surrounded by horses?
I definitely think at that time I knew that horses was something I wanted to have in my career, but I didn't have anything to do with the races. I hadn't even been to the races. My family aren't from a racing background at all, but I have 2 older sisters and we all learnt to ride, and then they got more interested in fashion and boys, and I was the last one, and I was the one that just kept, you know, tagging along with my mum. I never had my own pony until I was, I think it was about 14. We got him from Newark Market for something like £200, and which was quite a lot for me at the time. My mum legged me up on him, fell off him, got back on, and it was 8 times in the space of 2 hours I fell off him, but he definitely taught me how to ride.
Go on, Hayley!
Go in.
Go on!
Quick and shy.
At that stage, Hayley was spending a lot of time at a local riding stables that my mum was teaching at.
She ended up persuading my mum to take Wallace as her horse.
And I think as the years went on, we kind of got interested in other things, and Hayley kept with the horses the whole time.
And I think also being the youngest of the sisters, it's like you don't realise that you're actually younger than them. You just want to be as good or if not better than them. So I think that was quite natural to me.
Hayley and her friends,
They were here when the gates opened and they used to just never want to go home. They actually used to sleep on the roof of the stable block. They were wild. They were wild kids.
I remember that me and Hayley used to hack out a lot. We'd always have to race and things because Hayley was so competitive at everything she did. She'd always win and she'd always have to win.
She was very brave, really brave. She'd get on anything. In fact, the ponies that were more awkward were the ponies that she liked to ride the most. So if she fell off, she'd jump back up, never a question.
I was doing my GCSEs and I was lucky enough, there was a friend of mine whose dad was a permit holder in racing, and he says, I'm going to the Northern Racing College and you can learn to race horses there. So I was like, oh, that sounds good. So I went and did a taster day up at Doncaster and thought, yeah, I'm up for this. So I went there did my, I think it was a 10-week course and never looked back.
When we were still at school, Hayley told me she was going to become a jockey, and then next thing I knew, she was going to Doncaster. My initial reaction was, well, good for you, go for it. I wanted her to do well.
If I'm honest with you, I went into racing completely oblivious to the whole thing. And I mean, if you ask my mum and dad at the time that I was going to be a jockey and a successful one, I think they'd have given you 200 to 1 odds on it.
I didn't know anything about racing. It was just something that I thought, well, she'll give this a whirl, and if it doesn't work, then there's no harm done, because she's still young, she can move on to other things, which is what I was expecting. I was expecting it to have a shelf life, and then that would be it, and she'd get on to a proper job.
The first yard, which was in Southwell, which was quite close to where I lived with Mark Polglaze, was more to learn about the riding and to build my strength up, and then sort of learn about the racing. And there's so much detail into where the horses go, the trips, the tracks, all the different characters. You've got the famous trainers and the owners and the jockeys, and there's so much history, and I didn't know any of it.
When she came as a stable lass, she was able to ride out. We just tweaked things just to advance her from her technical background, which her mother had done so well prior to coming to us. There then became the sort of more involved world of the racing world and the racing calendar.
It's a totally different world. You've got places like Newmarket in East Anglia and Lambourne down towards the West Country, which are just completely all about horse racing.
Within inside the sport, you start with the breeder, and then you've got owners, all sorts of different characters, then you've got all the different trainers, and then you get into the jockeys themselves, then you've got the valets that they work in with the weighing room, then you've got the grooms, you've got the people who work at the stables, then you've got all the people in television. I mean, listen, it's a sport that employs tens of thousands of people, so there's people at every level.
I mean, I think for people like me, you get bitten by the bug when you're young, and you just buy into the fascination of the whole thing, and it just becomes like this really kind of enchanting place.
Who would be your sporting role models when you were starting out in your career?
The names that stood out was like Frankie Dettori. I think everyone knows Frankie, and Frankie's just consistently good, which I think is a great skill.
Frankie on fire, Stradivarius wins again. Frankie Dettori, the ARC winner, is the Breeders' Cup Turf winner too. Frankie saluting the crowd, a second champion stakes, and what a champion he is.
The driving force of my job is, first of all, is the love of the horse. I think that's paramount, you know. We are working with a living animal that is beautiful, is very fast, is exciting. And then you have the competition, and then you have the crowds, and then you have the smell, and the outside, and the thunder in the hooves. The whole package is fantastic, and that's what gets you hooked on it. There is no drug in the world can replace that feeling. It's amazing.
It's like AP McCoy as well. He's consistent. He's always been through his career, and I think he's had to work towards that.
Choosing Tony McCoy, now launching a tremendous attack on the outside. He's done it! What a hero! What a sportsman! What a jockey! 4,000 up for Tony McCoy and Mountain Dunes.
You have to be consistent all the time. You have to be repetitive, and repetitive means winning. You have to be able to keep winning. The difference with horse racing and being a jockey compared to other sports is you have to get inside the mind of an animal. And at the end of the day, the best chance you have of getting inside the mind of an animal to get it to do what you want to do is convince it that what you're wanting to do is the right thing.
Was there a particular person at that yard who was a driving force in your career?
Not necessarily, no. I had a few. I actually got my licence out there, and I had a few rides, and I had 8 rides, and I had a winner, and I was awful.
Hayley Turner, one of the least experienced riders in the field. She's a chance, but I wouldn't have put her any more than just a chance.
When she first came to me, she had a really good attitude towards riding, and she knew she was going somewhere, and I don't think she knew quite where she was going, but she was driven. She was always had that focus that she was able to, you know, see the next stage.
I was very weak. I was ready to move away from home. I heard about female jockeys in America tend to do really well, and I got offered the opportunity to go over there and sort of spend a few months to learn and strengthen up a little bit. In the mornings you'll ride like 10 to 13 horses. You're having to use your muscles and your strength to ride these horses. So I came back a much stronger, more confident jockey.
We'll get there. Crew Express and Tomley's Chicks beat them all on the line to win from Theatre Lady.
Great ride by Hayley Turner, though. I mean, it's lovely to see a woman rider doing so well, and she claims 5, but she's ridden 2 winners today.
Were there many more female jockeys over there than there were here?
I think that the UK definitely were behind the times with female riders.
I was the first woman to ride a winner at Royal Ascot. Through the late 80s and 90s, there was no one. Elaine Mellor was a really good friend of mine. She was a top amateur rider. So I wrote a letter to a trainer in New Zealand because the only place Elaine told me in the world that supported girls was New Zealand. In fact, they were about 30 years ahead on girls riding. And when I went over there, I was shocked. They were little, they were light, they could ride anything. And I felt I was in a different world compared to the UK.
It was a real novelty to have female riders in the first place. You know, back in the 80s, they were there, but they were treated, I wouldn't quite say as second-class citizens, but not quite on an equal footing, certainly.
We didn't have very much support at all. When I first told my trainer that I wanted to be a jockey, he was very bemused by it all, as was most of the staff. And it's very hard to prove your ability when you're relying on other people to give you a chance.
Before Hayley came along, female riders found it really difficult to even be able to get rides at the top level, at the big festivals, at the big meetings, at the Royal Ascots.
Gradually, you know, each kind of fresh hurdle was kicked down. They began getting more and more adopted as people realised that they can compete on an equal footing.
I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure she'd say it, when she first started, it would have been very much a male-dominated sport, which thankfully it isn't anymore, and she's played a big part in changing that.
The female jockeys are getting a lot more opportunities now because they're getting a lot more training to be stronger, and they're getting a lot more. They've got jockey coaches, they've got the Peter O'Sullivan houses, and where they're trained to do, you know, to be strong. And that's not something I ever had, so it was a case of just winging it again.
At the start of training, it was very, very tough. It was a solitude, sort of isolated sort of world, being a woman jockey. I mean, I did all the work myself. So I put my body through quite a bit of hammer, but you don't think of it. My father used to say, well, it's part of the job. Ballet dancers do it, models do it, you've got to do it. Now they don't have to waste so much. Our jockeys look so much healthier.
Jockeys are understanding that they need to be athletes. If we go back 10, 15 years, a jockey could rock up onto the race course, having smoked 20 a day and probably 10 pints deep, and still get on and perform. And in this day and age, that just doesn't happen. If you look at the best, Hayley can come in here and deadlift a good 80, 90 kilos, not a problem. Holly Doyle sort of deadlifting 130, 140 kilos. So when you're riding 500 races per year, you've got to be in good nick to be able to keep being able to do that and sustain that high level of performance.
I look back when I first met Sir Anthony McCoy, his diet was terrible. I mean, they are brilliant athletes now, very, very different. So diets improve, strength and conditioning, the facilities they've got access to, gym is everything. They have their own gyms now, and to think of that 20 years ago, I mean, he'd be looked at like an absolute loon.
You've got to have the technique, you've got to have the strength, and you've got to be fit to be able to ride racehorses. We spend a lot of time doing fitness here. The young people that are here on residential courses will do fitness 3 or 4 times a week with a specialist fitness instructor that we have here. It is crucial that they get that.
I'd rather be strong, fit and healthy than be light. From my approach, I just want to be, I go to the gym every day, sometimes twice a day. If you are disciplined in your gym routine and everything like that, and you put yourself across, they see you working hard and you put the homework in and put the hours in, then you do get given your chances, you know.
The fitness and the training that goes behind it, it's really killed the myth about girls not being strong enough.
You can't ride horses over a particular weight. I mean, it's possible that in 10, 20 years' time, the majority of jockeys will be female, and if not the majority, certainly pretty much an equal amount.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
I've been the first to do most of the things in racing, and that's always been a big deal.
The wall she's knocked down, the glass ceiling she's smashed through.
In this last 20 years, you know, it's opened eyes to other girls to say, well, if she can do it, we can.
Were there ever times where you felt it was made difficult for you because you were a female in a male-dominated environment?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's the prejudice, isn't it, with, you know, you've got some old school trainers and a lot of owners would prefer to have a male on their horses.
Some trainer saying the other day that, you know, just proposing the idea to try and keep more girls, you know, riding, but all girl jockeys should always get a £3 claim.
Yeah, there was an article in the Racing Post today about it, and I mean, it would be nice for me, but I don't think that the idea is ever going to materialise, really. I think it's just going to be one of those things where we're just going to have to keep doing it as best as we can and hope it starts to change.
To start with, I think it was as much my riding as the trainer, like Michael Bell, who I was apprentice for, willing to put his neck on the line because he's got a good jockey in his yard that he wants to use, and whether female or male.
Well, Hayley came to us as a very young, I think she was 17, 18. We have traditionally, or historically, done well with apprentices or given them chances. So Hayley came for an interview. It was pretty obvious that from day one she had talent.
So the horse's confidence is high. Yours certainly must be high at the moment.
Yeah, it's great.
And who are you with at the moment? Who are you working for?
Michael Bell, well, apprentice for Michael Bell. He got me licence at the beginning of this season, so he's been quite good to me, really. He's put me up on a couple of good horses, so.
Plenty of good experience.
When jockeys come to you as an apprentice, they're very young. You are very much a mentor to them and a guide and someone who can direct them on the right path through life. Hayley, for example, I guess would look at Michael Bell as being that person. In the early days, he was a real guide to her, and there are trainers that are very, very good at it, trainers that are probably not so good at it.
And Hayley, you've won now, I think that's 7 for the season, 8 altogether. It's going quite well, really.
Yeah, and it's all happened, you know, really quick.
And putting all that to good effect under Michael Bell's supervision, he's been a good governor for you.
He certainly has, yeah. That's my 4th winner for him this season, so he keeps putting me up, so I can't complain there. He's been really good to me.
If you can find a trainer that gives you support, then it's a big help in this industry. Well, I remember when I first met Hayley and she first started coming on the scene. It's not a terminology I like to use, but we used to say she rides like a lad. But she's also very determined. You know, she wouldn't give you an inch in a race, and I wouldn't give her an inch in a race.
From when I started to how it is now, the weighing room is so much busier. It's full of girls now. And the reason for that is because they're getting better, they're getting coached, they're getting stronger, and they're good enough to be there. Holly Doyle is just raising the bar, and she's inspiring more girls.
History in the making here. Mistress Nelly is out in front. Holly Doyle for a 5-timer. Can she just hold on? Yes, she can.
Magnificent, a well-deserved first Royal Ascot success for Holly Doyle.
I knew that coming into the industry, my dad always used to say you have to work twice as hard because, you know, you're a female, and that's what I did. And I think probably throughout my career, a few owners haven't used me because I am a girl. But to be honest, I never really got down or affected by it. I thought, fair enough, I'll just try and prove you wrong, and hopefully I'll be good enough for you one day. It's a massive honour to know that people look up to the likes of me and Hayley, and you know, for me to even be classed in the same league as Hayley these days is amazing, because it only feels like 5 minutes ago I was looking up to her. So it's a huge privilege and honour, and I hope I can inspire and encourage other girls to do this job.
In a lot of ways, it can be an advantage to be the female jockey. How important is the attention and the profile?
I've been the first to do most of the things in racing, and that's always been a big deal.
The key for Hayley Turner is she's there to win races, and she's there to win big races. So when she wins Group 1s, when she wins at Royal Ascot, you know, that's when, you know, she gets splashed all over the front page, and she's great for the Racing Post because she sells newspapers.
In this last 20 years, you know, it's opened eyes to other girls to say, well, if she can do it, we can. And so she was basically the first, well, most known lady jockey in my generation. And like I said, she's opened doors for the rest, and she wants to be proud of that.
Dream Ahead, though, joining in with Hayley Turner, and Dream Ahead has won the Darlington Cup.
I'm a dreamer, marketing mix. I'm a dreamer, reached out to just win the Beverly D.
Dream Ahead, first was, she was the first woman to ride an outright Group 1 winner in England, which was a massive feat. The rider who was riding at the time, William Buick, was retained to go and ride somewhere else, and I was looking for a replacement, and Hayley fitted the bill. And to go and win that first Group 1 in a sport that's, you know, dominated by men, or certainly was at the time, you know, it was huge and big for the sport, and front page headlines. A year later, we sent a horse over to America, a race called the Beverly D, a Group 1, and she became the first British female to ride an international Group 1, which again was a huge feat in itself, and, you know, very special to me, and I know very special to her.
There's no question the highlight for me, being there the day when she won at Royal Ascot, was very, very special. It was a seismic moment for the sport, really. Hadn't been done for such a long time. It was very emotive too, and I remember the celebration well. I remember her coming over to the podium. I remember her kissing the camera. I remember having a tear in my eye, actually. Thankfully, it was in an advert break, because speaking wouldn't have been very easy after that.
She has been a trailblazer throughout her career, and the one thing that was missing was this Royal Ascot win. And so for her to do that on one of mine was fantastic, and something I'm very, very proud of.
Before Hayley, it was very hard to break through, but then Hayley showed to the world that, you know, there is possible, you know, for girls to break in my sport. And then people like Josephine Gordon came along, and then now Holly Dold, and she's smashing every record. But I would say that Hayley was the pioneer.
The walls she's knocked down, the glass ceilings she's smashed through, and the way she's done it in such a determined but also such a charming fashion. She's the one that's inspired them and shown what is possible.
The likes of Rachel Blackmore riding loads of winners at Cheltenham wasn't, oh my word, look what the female's just done. It was like, what a great jockey.
Straight 11 victories for Honeysuckle. She is the winner of the Unibet Champion Hurdle. And Quilixios is kicking away, and it's going to be number 6 for Rachel Blackmore at the meeting.
Being a jockey was always something that I wanted to do, but I just never envisaged I could make a career out of it, I suppose. Hayley's only a couple of years older than me, but she established herself very quickly. Watching her achieve big things on the big stages was incredibly inspirational for me, and you know, the opportunities are there, male or female.
McManus, Henry de Bromhead, and more significantly, Rachel Blackmore. History in the National, Minella Times wins.
The feeling crossing the line, you know, just sheer elation. I think it's testament to all the work that's gone before me with lady riders that I crossed the line and wasn't hit by the fact that I'm a lady rider who's the first woman to do this.
I think what Hayley Turner did was take the evolution of female jockeys being integrated and accepted as equals in the sport from a fairly low base to pretty much the final step. You know, she basically stopped people saying that awful phrase, the best compliment I can give her is that you can't tell she's a woman. People have stopped saying that now, thank goodness.
Holly Doyle, who's flying the flag at the moment, it annoys her when they compare her to other female jockeys. It's like, why compare her to male jockeys? Because she's better than most of them. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not about being a girl as a jockey, it's about being a good jockey.
Female jockeys are rapidly proving that there's very little difference between male and female jockeys anymore, and that really it's just talent Doesn't matter what sex you are.
I looked up to, you know, Hayley Ryan Moore, and, you know, didn't look up to Hayley because she was a woman. I looked up to her because she was a good jockey, and I've always tried to mix with the men and fit in with everyone. If you're worried about what they think of you, then you might be in the wrong game, really. You've got to be a bit tough, thick-skinned, but that's just the way it is.
Not just Hayley, but lots of the other girls have proved that they're every bit as good as the men. And I think from young girls, especially watching sport and TV, watching horse racing, will think, God, there's one of the very few sports that I can go up against the men and beat them.
We don't really look at them as females anymore. You're a jockey. If you're strong enough to be a jockey, if you've got the mindset and the mentality to be a jockey, it doesn't matter if you're a male or a female. You just need to be tough and hard enough to get on with it.
She believes that she is as good as the lads.
You go out on the track and you don't do anyone any favours, and you gain their respect. 20 years of hanging out with lads has probably polluted my mind slightly.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
Dr. Turner said, we're going to stand you down for a year and then we're going to review it, but you're unlikely to be able to race ride again. I was on a high and then they were just going to take it off me, and that was the hardest thing.
That's it.
Taking a little look.
Yeah. The grandstand is miles away. So I thought I'll stay with her a little bit and just put my head in front in the end. Just let her know.
How do you feel about your daughter wanting to become a jockey?
I knew that question was coming. I'm absolutely petrified. Obviously, it's a dangerous sport, and being a father, you always try to look after your children. And, you know, there is still very much a male-dominant sport. It'd be an ambition of mine to ride with her.
Do you think it was written in the stars that you would follow in his footsteps?
Well, I think whether or not I went into racing, he always wanted us to ride, like all 5 of us. I sort of definitely figured it all out myself. He didn't give me much
Well,
help.
I didn't want to, because I think if I tell you too much to her, they might confuse you. I knew he could ride. So I thought, well, you know, look, we all have to learn somewhere, and I thought, well, if I have to step in, I'll step in, but you figured it out all yourself, so I'm very proud of you and well done.
Thanks.
But if you were looking ahead to a potential career in racing, is it hard to make a living as a female jockey?
I think it's just more the fact that girls didn't feel like they had the opportunity to get into the industry. A few years ago, before like Hayley and Holly, they were sort of the only ones. It sort of felt it was like the men could only sort of do it. It just makes you have someone to aim for, I guess, so it doesn't feel so shut off and very exclusive.
The role models are incredibly important, and so are being able to see the events on television, the visibility.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to light a spark, but if they never see it,
exactly,
they never have the chance to feel like it's something that they might want to be one day.
Exactly, and I always say that it's like you're always going to be good at a job if you enjoy it. Like, I didn't know about the racing school. Only went because my friend in my year was going, and I hadn't even heard of it, and it'd be nice if the schools made it a more approachable job to do.
This school has no entry requirements, so it doesn't matter whether you have academic qualifications or equine experience. All we're looking for is commitment. I think without doubt the prominence of Hayley and the other young girls coming up behind her now has led to an increase in young girls applying to come on the courses. I mean, I think Hayley really was a pathfinder.
If you go into the British racing school now, you'll see a lot more girls. And I think that's down to someone like Hayley Turner. I think all those young girls watching the TV thinking, God, you can make a go of this, you can make a career of this, and you can be successful at it.
The beauty of this school and this job is that they become focused. Physically, they're active, they're getting their energy and they're channeling it into something that's important to them.
The racing schools cater not just for people that have ridden ponies before, but for people that have never had anything to do with horses, but want to learn, and sometimes that's almost a better way because you're learning about racing from scratch.
Young girls coming into racing, some are a little bit timid about going into a racing school. I think girls are brilliant to have that touch with a horse, that feel of the horse.
We teach people of all abilities. People come together and they work together.
This school is open to any young person who wants to give it a go. All we ask is that they come for an interview and show commitment, and we will give them a chance.
Your first race, you were 17, and that turned out to be a race that had some quite devastating consequences.
Yeah, it was for Declan Carroll, and it was a 2-mile race. He said, just go and enjoy yourself, which is great because there's no pressure then. And I got halfway round, so I got to the mile marker, and my horse just suddenly stopped and started hopping, and the field is sort of 16 runners have just rushed past me, and I'm there, and my horse broke its leg, and I couldn't believe it, so I jumped off him. Luckily, he stayed up, and I jumped off him, and then they had to put him down. And then the worst thing was my mum and dad were stood at the winning line, obviously frantic. Where is our daughter? We've just let her go in and have her first ride and she's not come back.
Obviously, as a mother, all sorts of things were going through her mind, worrying about what had happened. And then she saw Hayley walking across the track with obviously a sigh of relief that she was okay.
So when I walked, they were there, are you okay? Is everything all right? And it was the worst thing because their fuss just made me want to cry. But it didn't put me off. It's a very rare occurrence to happen on my first ride. I mean, if anything was going to put me off, that would have done, and it didn't.
I think it shows where Hayley has true spirit, true drive, true determination, because that horse ultimately had broken a leg and had to be euthanized. Now, for a young jockey, a young apprentice, that must have been devastating, shocking, would have put many, many people off.
After that, it was straight back
to business.
Back to business, focusing on what she wanted to do, and that was to be a great jockey. And there wasn't really any discussion about doing anything else. That's what she was going to do.
There's been more downs than ups. It's been a tough journey, but I wouldn't sort of regret any of it.
So often what makes you stronger are these setbacks, and you've had your fair share of injuries. Can you talk us through one or two of those?
I always think that of all the injuries I have, it's harder for my friends and family than it is for me. The first thing when I get injured, whether it's, back, head, ankle, it's how long have I got to be off for? When can I get back riding?
The worst bit when Hayley's ill is not the injuries, it's the fact she can't race. And it's been every single time, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That she's had an injury, and there's been a lot.
She just gets frustrated. She's frustrated she's injured. She's not sorry for herself that she's injured. She's frustrated she's got rides that she's missing out on, and there's certain things, she can't do what she's supposed to do.
Tonight, Nottinghamshire's top woman jockey Hayley Turner is having tests in hospital tonight. She was knocked unconscious after a fall on the Newmarket Gallops this morning.
The first bad injury I had was a head injury. I rode a horse for Phil McEntee, and he just jumped out the stalls, and it was a sprinter, so we were going sort of 35, 40 miles an hour, and the horse broke its shoulder, and it fired me into the ground, but so direct, and I landed on my head, and that's all I remember. But apparently, when they got to me, I had blood coming out of my ears. So obviously, my family are having to wait to, get me to the hospital, get me scanned, see if I'm going to be okay. Because usually, when you have blood coming out your ears, it means you've fractured your skull or cracked it.
I think when we walked into the hospital, you cried.
Yeah, I did. I wasn't expecting to see how she was. She looked very sorry for herself.
She didn't even look like Hayley, did she?
No.
She just looked like, her whole face was swollen. I don't even think now she realises how serious it was.
Now, I've got to ask you, the injury, first of all, 6 weeks ago, you were out on the gallops, you took a crashing fall, you had a severe head injury. What is the latest news? You haven't ridden since then?
No, it's been pretty frustrating, to be honest. I'm feeling 100% now and absolutely desperate to get back riding again. I'm having a meeting with Dr. Turner on Tuesday. He'll let me know how much longer I've got to have off. So fingers crossed, but he's obviously got to be very careful with it being a head injury.
They stood me down for a year, which I actually appealed. Dr. Turner said, we're going to stand you down for a year and then we're going to review it. but you're unlikely to be able to race ride again.
I find it hard to understand, to be honest. It feels like I'm being punished for, you know, I'm not allowed to ride. It's like I've been banned for doing something, because to me, I'm 100%. I could go to Newmarket and ride in every race today and I'd feel fine.
Her accident was on the gallops. The falls can be just as devastating on the gallops. Now, I'm not saying she shouldn't ride now or at any time. That's up to the medical people. But I find it inconceivable that you're allowed to ride work but not ride in races. Now, I cannot believe that the medical authorities are saying this.
But it's also a big blow for racing in general, because whatever we think of it, in terms of her riding, she had created something for racing that people can't do naturally.
And this was like shortly after I'd had my first 100 winners in a year, and I wanted more, and I just felt like I'd just getting going, and it was my dream job, and I was on a high, and then they were just going to take it off me, and that was the hardest thing, and I managed to get back riding from that injury after 4 months.
Yeah. So how are you feeling?
Good, yeah, fine.
I know you was very, very excited beforehand, but what did it feel like once you jumped out the gates?
Yeah, just back to normal, like getting on a bike, really. It's no different to what I'm used to.
Jockeys are a special breed of person. These guys want to get back on the horse as quickly as they physically can. Hayley's had a couple of injuries in the past that we've dealt with. Fortunately for myself and our clinical team here, Hayley's mature enough to sort of understand the injury process and what needs to be done to get there.
You showed incredible resilience and determination to get yourself back in the saddle again. Was there ever any point where you felt a bit fearful about getting going again?
I think there's probably one occasion where I rushed back too soon, and that did set me back. And because everyone could see.
Coming up next on Driving Force.
To anyone to be any good in any walk of life has to have an ego. And there's an egotistical thing in every sports person that's any good. If there's not, what are they doing it for?
I'm quite selfish, and it's all about me.
She's had some horrendous falls. I worked for James Fanshawe when she had an awful fall at Doncaster off a filly called Seal of Approval.
Turner working hard on Seal of Approval and trapped in a bit of a pocket, has come down. Seal of Approval appeared to clip heels and has given Hayley Turner a heavy fall.
And it was the sort of fall that you wouldn't expect horse or rider to get up from, and Hayley was badly hurt.
I think she broke 2, 3, 4 vertebrae in her back. And that'd be enough to finish, you know, a lot of jockeys.
And I think Hayley would be the first one to say that it knocked her confidence massively. She was not the same rider for a long time after that. And you see it happen to jockeys. You can see jockeys whose, we call it, their bottle is going, but it must be unbelievably hard to get over, because, you know, they are risking their life every single time, and it just takes one mistake in one split second and something disastrous can happen, as we see relatively regularly.
As a jockey, I had bad days. I have bad images in my head of colleagues being fatally injured that you just never get over. It's one of the toughest jobs, one of the toughest parts of the whole sport, is to be able to get over those injuries.
I could notice when I saw her race riding after that, you know, her nerve and her confidence definitely went. To return like she did, you know, with an opportunity is fantastic.
Falls and injuries are part and parcel of what we do. You know, they happen every day of the week, and I think, you know, the moment that you're maybe overthinking it and thinking about getting back on, you know, that's probably the time you should hang up your boots. We're so used to them happening, and it's not something you can dwell on.
Your parents, have they ever tried to dissuade you from continuing?
No, because they know better. They know they'd have absolutely no chance. It's definitely worse for them, because I'm quite selfish, and it's all about me.
To anyone to be any good in any walk of life has to have an ego. And there's an egotistical thing in every sports person that's any good. If there's not, what are they doing it for? It's a very selfish thing to say, I can't believe she's in this. But it's like, it's all about me.
I've been sitting, watching television and seen her have a terrible fall and not being able to find out anything about it. Trying to phone up the Doncaster racecourse to find out whether she was alive or not.
My mum, my dad, and we would never say you need to stop because it's something she loves.
I think it's always been part of the course of, you know, you fall off, you get back on again, no matter how severe it's been. And the less downtime she can have from the injury, the happier she is.
The other thing the family do put up well with is I might not make a christening or a barbecue or a birthday party because in racing it's every day. I've missed quite a few things like that and they're really understanding.
We do get a little bit resentful occasionally, don't we?
Yeah, now and again, we're like, you chose that horse over me.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but we know that that's the way the racing industry works, and if she doesn't give it 100%, well, she can
somebody else will.
Yeah, somebody else will, and she can get dropped. So, but that's what I would think. It'd be nice to have her as a daughter on a more regular basis.
Do you have a sports psychologist that you work with to prepare you for handling the life and the business of what you do?
We don't actually. Racing's quite behind with the support and help that we've had from when I started. It's quite a gruelling sport, and although we talk about all the highs, I had a winner yesterday. Today's a new day. Particularly now with social media, you see all the glamorous sides of it with the trophies and the champagne being sprayed. But there's a lot that goes on before that.
The defeats in this game outweigh the wins and the triumphs, and the defeats take a lot longer to get over than the euphoria of actually winning.
I think my first 10 years of being champion jockey, I regularly came home on a Saturday evening, sat at the end of my bed with the curtains open at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, looking at the sky, thinking, what's gone wrong? Why am I so useless?
They go through a bad form, they have a bad injury, people forget, people move on. It's brutal.
It's hard to be strong when you're tired. It's important to be able to keep your head above water.
It's incredibly grueling, 14, 15 hour days every day, so that puts a lot of people off.
It's a tough road, but there's a lot more help now than there was when I started. You've got the jockey coaches, people helping with health and nutrition, and I just think if it's something that they enjoy and they are willing to put in the work, then do it, definitely.
So when you race, you're racing for the owner of the horse. Do they pay you a fee to race for them, and then if you win, do you get a bonus?
Yeah, so each race you get a riding fee. We have to pay for our petrol to get to the race course. We have to pay for our valets. We have to pay for our agents. So you probably end up with about 100 quid for a ride. And then if you win, you get sort of 7% of the prize money. The prize money in England's not very good. It's not looking likely to improve in the near future. I'm lucky enough to build up my profile enough to have the support of sponsorship and stuff, but I didn't start like that. I was, living in a bedsit. I didn't ever rely on my parents for money at any point, and I scraped through and I enjoyed it.
If you want to be a rider and you want to ride in public, you really, really are going to have to work hard. And people have to realise that working with animals, working with racehorses is not a job. This is a way of life.
It is tough, it is hard work, but, if you're really determined and want to do it, you will succeed, and it can elevate you to a wonderful life.
So what's next for you?
My dream would be to get to 1,000 winners, and I've got 100, just over 100 to go, which is easier said than done because there's so could quite easily get injured and sort of running out of time a little bit. But yeah, I'm just keep going whilst I'm enjoying it.
She's overachieved anything that we could expect her to have done, and she's still smashing it out the park.
Yeah.
She is an inspiration to a lot of the girls and women out there, to just show them that you can do whatever you want.
Hayley, she didn't come from money, she didn't come from anything. She became somebody from nothing, really. She's just great for people to see where you can be if you really want to.
To see someone who you've trained, it's all worthwhile, all the early mornings and the getting on at them, and she just had the right attitude.
It's been fascinating to hear your backstory for someone like me who doesn't know hardly anything about horse racing but has been so impressed by what you've done, but also what the other female jockeys have done. But without question, you have led the way and you are an inspiration. Thank you, Hayley Turner.